The 80s were when television said, forget subtlety and embraced pure testosterone-fueled insanity, creating action shows so gloriously over the top that modern streaming series looked like documentary footage. These 8 forgotten gems prove that sometimes the best entertainment comes from throwing logic out the window and doubling down on explosions, mullets, and synthesizer soundtracks. The Fall Guy should have been just another stuntman show, but instead, this 1981 masterpiece became a behind-the-scenes Hollywood expose disguised as a bounty hunter adventure where Lee Majors played Colt Seavers, a stuntman who moonlights capturing fugitives using his GMC pickup truck and an encyclopedic knowledge of practical effects that makes modern CGI look like expensive laziness. Colt teams up with his rookie cousin Howie and the fearless stuntwoman Jody Banks to track down criminals while performing death-defying stunts that were completely real because this was back when television actually cared about authenticity over green screens. What makes this production absolutely wild is how Heather Thomas became an 80s icon by doing her own stunts as Jody, but the dark side of fame hit hard when she had to shoot a stalker who broke into her bedroom with rock salt.
I always had a bodyguard in the house, because that's where I didn't want to come home to a dark house. And I know I had one guy one night cut my screen in my bedroom and got in, and I shot him and with rock salt and birdshot.
And the intense physical demands of the role combined with Hollywood's brutal expectations eventually drove her to leave the industry entirely after getting struck by a car in 1986 while dealing with personal struggles that nobody talks about. Behind the scenes, Lee Majors was performing his own dangerous stunts until a serious eye injury in 1983 forced professional stunt doubles to take over the most dangerous sequences, while the production team, known as the Black and Blue Crew, included legendary stuntmen who had worked on classic films and brought that movie-quality action to television. The show's modified GMC trucks became characters themselves, with General Motors providing specially adapted vehicles with relocated engines to survive the constant jumps and crashes, essentially creating a fleet of stunt vehicles that influenced every action show that followed. Here was a series that understood the real thrill of action television came from genuine danger and authentic stunts, proving that sometimes the most entertaining shows are the ones where the cast is literally risking their lives for your amusement. The Dukes of Hazzard proves that the most beloved television shows are often the ones with the most chaotic behind-the-scenes drama, and honestly, this 1979 series about moonshine-running cousins became a cultural phenomenon despite contract disputes that nearly destroyed the entire production. Bo and Luke Duke tear around Hazzard County in their iconic orange Dodge Charger, the General Lee, constantly outwitting corrupt boss Hogg and bumbling Sheriff Roscoe, while their cousin Daisy Duke redefines television fashion with shorts so legendary, they literally got named after her character. What makes this production absolutely insane is how John Schneider and Tom Wopat staged a dramatic walkout during the 5th season over pay disputes and royalties, essentially abandoning the show at its peak popularity and forcing producers to bring in replacement actors that fans absolutely hated. Behind the scenes, the General Lee became both the show's biggest star and most controversial element, with dozens of Dodge Chargers getting destroyed during filming, while that Confederate flag on the roof created a cultural legacy that's still being debated decades later, essentially turning a car into a political symbol that nobody saw coming. Catherine Bach's creation of Daisy Dukes started as costume reluctance but became a fashion phenomenon that influenced an entire generation of women, proving that sometimes the most iconic television moments happen by accident when actors embrace characters they initially didn't want to play. The physical demands were extreme, with elaborate car stunts and jumps that required authentic crashes and real danger, making every chase sequence feel genuinely thrilling because the cast and crew were actually risking their lives for entertainment. Here was a show that accidentally created cultural touchstones while nearly self-destructing from internal conflicts, proving that sometimes the most memorable television comes from productions that are barely holding together behind the scenes. Airwolf should have been the ultimate military helicopter fantasy, but instead this 1984 series became a cautionary tale about how addiction and budget cuts can destroy even the most badass premise, where Jan Michael Vincent played Stringfellow Hawk, a reclusive Vietnam veteran who pilots a stolen supersonic attack helicopter for a secret government agency while searching for his missing brother. Hawk teams up with his mentor Dominic Santini, played by Ernest Borgnine, to complete dangerous missions using the most advanced aircraft ever conceived, essentially combining Top Gun with Knight Rider before either of those existed. What makes this production absolutely tragic is how Jan Michael Vincent's severe alcoholism and chronic back problems created constant chaos on set, with frequent absences and unpredictable behavior that forced producers to rewrite episodes and reduce his screen time, essentially watching a talented actor self-destruct while trying to maintain a television series. Behind the scenes, Ernest Borgnine became the stabilizing force who kept morale alive during the production nightmare, using his decades of Hollywood experience to mentor cast and crew while Vincent struggled with personal demons that made filming increasingly difficult. The fourth season disaster was legendary, with the original production company losing the rights and a Canadian company taking over with a drastically reduced budget, killing off beloved characters and replacing the iconic helicopter with stock footage that made the show look like a cheap knockoff of itself. The network's desperate attempt to revive Airwolf for syndication resulted in one of television's most notorious botched reboots, essentially proving that sometimes it's better to let a series die with dignity than watch it get butchered by executives who don't understand what made it special. Here was a show that combined cutting-edge aviation technology with Cold War paranoia, but ultimately became a reminder that behind-the-scenes problems can destroy even the most spectacular on-screen action. Street Hawk proves that having the coolest motorcycle in television history means nothing if your show only lasts 13 episodes. And honestly, this 1985 series about a high-tech crime-fighting bike deserved a better fate than getting crushed by Knight Rider's popularity and network indifference. Jesse Mock, played by Rex Smith, is a former motorcycle cop who becomes the secret pilot of Street Hawk, a futuristic stealth bike equipped with weapons and advanced technology that he uses to fight urban crime, while keeping his vigilante identity hidden from his day job. The concept was basically Batman with a motorcycle instead of a car, combining sci-fi gadgetry with gritty street-level action that should have been a perfect formula for 80s television success. What makes this production absolutely frustrating is how the signature motorcycle constantly broke down during filming, with mechanical problems causing expensive delays and budget overruns that made producers question whether the ambitious special effects were worth the headache of actually making the show. Behind the scenes, Rex Smith embraced the physically demanding role despite the grueling shooting schedule, but the show's brief run meant that audiences barely got to see his full potential as an action star before network executives pulled the plug. The competition was brutal, with Street Hawk getting lost in a crowded field of high-tech crime fighter shows, while constant time slot changes and insufficient marketing guaranteed that most viewers never even knew it existed. The network executives reportedly clashed over the show's tone and pacing, creating behind-the-scenes instability that made it impossible to build the consistent audience that similar shows like Knight Rider had cultivated through better support and promotion. Here was a series that understood the appeal of futuristic vigilante justice but got sabotaged by technical problems and corporate mismanagement, proving that sometimes the most innovative television concepts die because the business side of Hollywood can't figure out how to support creative ambition. Riptide should have been the perfect 80s detective show, combining Vietnam veterans, high-tech gadgets, and Southern California beach vibes, but instead this 1984 series became a cautionary tale about how even the strongest cast chemistry can't overcome terrible scheduling decisions and network indifference. Cody Allen and Nick Ryder run the Pier 56 detective agency from their boat headquarters, recruiting their former Army buddy Murray Bosbazinski, a brilliant hacker who builds robots and operates early computers to solve cases ranging from kidnapping to corporate espionage. The trio's dynamic was genuinely entertaining, with Perry King's methodical leadership, Joe Penny's impulsive action hero energy, and Tom Bray's lovable nerd genius creating the kind of authentic friendship that most television shows only pretend to achieve. What makes this production absolutely frustrating is how NBC scheduled Riptide directly against Moonlighting, essentially guaranteeing that Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd's witty romantic tension would crush any competition, no matter how good the alternative programming actually was. Behind the scenes, Perry King struggled with the physical demands of boat and helicopter stunts, while Tom Bray got so typecast as the tech whiz that his career never recovered after the show ended, essentially sacrificing his future opportunities for 3 seasons of cult television that most people never even got to see. The show's technology focus was genuinely ahead of its time, featuring early computer hacking and robotics that predicted how detective work would actually evolve. But the creative team faced constant pressure from executives who wanted more action and less of the quirky humor that made the series unique. The competition was so brutal that the producers actually created a meta-episode parodying Moonlighting, essentially admitting defeat while trying to win over audiences who were clearly watching something else entirely. Here was a detective show that understood the future of crime-fighting technology but got destroyed by scheduling warfare, proving that sometimes the best television concepts die because network executives care more about competing against other shows than supporting their own programming. The Greatest American Hero proves that the most beloved cult classics are often the shows that nobody knew how to handle while they were actually on the air. And honestly, this 1981 superhero comedy was so far ahead of its time that it took decades for audiences to fully appreciate its genius. Ralph Hinckley, played by William Catt, is a high school teacher who receives a superhero suit from aliens but immediately loses the instruction manual, creating this brilliant premise where every heroic attempt becomes a hilarious disaster as he tries to figure out his powers through trial and error. The show balanced comedy with genuine heroism, exploring how an ordinary person would actually cope with supernatural abilities while dealing with FBI agent Bill Maxwell, who becomes his reluctant mentor in the most mismatched partnership in television history, What makes this production absolutely wild is how William Catt suffered through wearing that famously uncomfortable superhero suit, which was so tight and restrictive that filming action sequences became physically torturous, essentially creating genuine discomfort that enhanced his character's awkward relationship with his powers. Behind the scenes, Catt battled constant typecasting that limited his career opportunities while struggling with the show's tonal inconsistencies, as writers and producers couldn't decide whether they were making a lighthearted comedy or a serious superhero drama, creating creative tension that sometimes frustrated everyone involved. The show faced criticism from conservative viewers who thought it trivialized heroism and responsibility, while critics were divided between praising its fresh approach and dismissing it as too campy for mainstream acceptance, essentially creating a polarized reception that hurt its ratings but enhanced its cult appeal. The production was plagued by lost footage and unused scripts, with entire episodes being rewritten or never aired due to budget constraints and creative disagreements, creating this mythology of unseen content that fans still discuss decades later. Here was a superhero show that understood the comedy inherent in having powers you can't control, but got trapped between different audience expectations and never found the consistent tone that might have made it a mainstream success rather than just a beloved cult classic. Wiseguy should have revolutionized crime television forever, but instead this 1987 masterpiece became a cautionary tale about how innovative storytelling can't survive when your lead actor gets physically and psychologically destroyed by the role. Ken Wall played Vincent Terranova, an undercover FBI agent who infiltrates criminal organizations so deeply that the line between his real identity and his criminal personas completely disappears. The show pioneered serialized storytelling with multi-episode arcs exploring mafia families, arms dealers, and corrupt corporations, creating the template for every prestige crime drama that followed while nobody was paying attention. What makes this production absolutely tragic is how Ken Wall suffered multiple on-set injuries from the demanding action sequences and became so psychologically affected by portraying a character living in constant deception and danger that it contributed to his mid-series departure, essentially proving that method acting has actual consequences when the role requires you to embody criminal behavior for months at a time. Behind the scenes, the show's most controversial storyline featured Kevin Spacey as Mel Prophet, a bipolar arms dealer with an incestuous relationship with his sister that pushed network television into psychological territory nobody had attempted before, creating moral complexity that polarized audiences who expected clear heroes and villains from their crime shows. The production faced constant challenges, filming in Vancouver as one of the early examples of American television moving to Canada for cost savings, creating logistical nightmares that enhanced the show's gritty atmosphere but made everything more complicated for cast and crew. When Wall left and Stephen Bauer replaced him, the show lost its creative soul, with fans and critics immediately noting the decline in quality and chemistry that highlighted how irreplaceable certain actors become when they define a series' entire identity. The moral ambiguity was genuinely groundbreaking, forcing viewers to question the nature of justice and loyalty while watching an FBI agent adopt criminal ethics. But the psychological toll on everyone involved proved that sometimes the most innovative television comes at too high a personal cost. Here was a crime drama that understood the blurred lines between good and evil better than any show before or since, but couldn't survive the real-world consequences of asking actors to inhabit those dangerous moral spaces for years at a time. Hunter proves that the toughest cop shows often hide the messiest behind-the-scenes drama, and honestly, this 1984 series about an LAPD detective who bends every rule became as notorious for its production conflicts as it was for Fred Dreyer's relentless pursuit of justice on the streets of Los Angeles. Rick Hunter teams up with the by-the-book Sergeant D.D. McCall to solve violent crimes using methods that constantly push the boundaries between effective policing and excessive force, creating this tension between street justice and proper procedure that defined 80s cop television. What makes this production absolutely wild is how Fred Dreyer performed his own stunts and suffered multiple injuries while maintaining impossibly high standards for the show's portrayal of law enforcement, essentially becoming as demanding and uncompromising as the character he portrayed. Behind the scenes, Stephanie Kramer's departure due to contract disputes fundamentally changed the show's dynamic, with fans mourning the loss of the Hunter-McCall partnership that had been central to the series' appeal, while Kramer herself spoke openly about the brutal production schedule that included constant night shoots and controversial violence that drew criticism from civil rights groups. The show faced ongoing backlash for glorifying excessive police force and blurring ethical lines during an era when cop dramas were already under scrutiny for their portrayal of law enforcement, creating this moral panic that forced producers to occasionally tone down the violence without ever fully abandoning the gritty realism that defined the series.